In the first story, we see a pregnant woman who is crying and begging her husband to not leave her. It is the month of December, and the entire city is covered in a thick blanket of snow. The woman can barely walk due to her 8-month pregnancy, but despite this, her husband is adamant on leaving. He says that he will be back in a few days after gathering some supplies. Before going out though, he hands her a jar of magical roots, which will apparently prevent the baby from being born. 13 years pass by, but the man has still not returned. The house is in a state of utter chaos, as we see maggots crawling through the sea of garbage and filth. Miraculously, the woman is still alive and still pregnant. The roots seem to have worked, but the only problem is that her baby has grown inside her womb. It has now become the size of an adult human, because of which the woman is unable to stand up or move properly. She is still hopeful that her husband will return soon, and so she keeps calling out his name. Shockingly, the baby inside her womb has now started talking. Its gender is not specified, but it can make genuine conversations with the woman, like asking her what they're going to have for food, or when is dad coming. One day, the woman catches someone's pet cat in her trap and eats it for dinner. While the act is very ruthless and inhumane, it is the only way she can survive. However, she lies to her baby that she cooked a rabbit, so as to not offend it. That night, as the woman is getting ready to sleep, she experiences extreme contractions. Due to her pregnancy, she rushes to the jar to ingest the root, but sadly for her, they are no more. It appears as if the woman ate the last strand in the morning. The sight of the empty jar terrifies her and she drops to the floor, crying. Just then, the baby inside her announces that it is coming out. The woman begs it to stop, saying, "Please don't leave me," but the baby has made up its mind. It simply says, "There is enough room for the two of us." The next second, the giant baby starts twisting inside the woman's body, causing her to die in an instant. Then, a gruesome montage shows the woman being completely disemboweled by the baby. A few hours later, after the procedure ends, the baby, in the body of its mother, stands up for the first time. It cleans up the excess flesh on the floor, throws it outside, and then sews its own stomach. Some weeks later, we see the baby living a completely normal life. It has made the house neat and tidy, along with itself. Right then, its father arrives at the door after 13 long years. He acts as if he was gone for only a day or two. The baby looks at him in disbelief, but the man, who is unaware of what happened, approaches it with lust in his eyes. The movie ends as he unzips the baby's clothes to make romance with it. Second story. The second movie starts in a rural village in America, where a 6-year-old boy named Troy lives with his parents. His dad, Jeffrey, is a neo-Nazi skinhead, who despises everyone apart from his own race. Troy's mom, Krista, however, is a well-mannered and calm lady. Despite being the odd couple, the two love their son a lot and always make sure that he is happy. One day, they go on a trip with some other neo-Nazis and have a fun time at the beach. Jeffrey bets against everyone that his son can land a perfect aim with his rifle. This gets everyone excited, so they bet $50 each. To their surprise, the 6-year-old expertly strikes his target from a distance. This makes Jeffrey very proud, and he quickly collects the winning cash from his gang. At night, the family goes to a department store to spend their winnings. Troy is given the freedom to choose anything he wants, including beer and chocolates, while they are at the counter. Troy spots a black man named JD playing with a toy and innocently smiles at him. JD also smiles back, and the two seem to have formed an instant bond. However, Their happy moment is rudely cut short when the racist Jeffrey scolds the man for looking at his son. He even speaks some racial slurs in front of everyone. As expected. This enrages JD and he curses at Jeffrey before leaving the store. Unfortunately, the altercation turns out to be the start of a brutal war. Jeffrey, who is also infuriated that he was cursed at, immediately calls his gang and asks them to arrive outside the store. Krista tries her best to calm her husband down, but all in vain. Even little Troy can do nothing but watch his father become aggressive by the second. Soon, the gang arrives and they beat the hell out of the man in front of his own family. JD's kids are terrified inside their car, but their screams and cries for help only fall on deaf ears. After the beatdown is done, Jeffrey makes sure to humiliate the poor man even more by pouring a gallon of milk over his face. All this is observed by one of JD's sons, Bronny, who appears to have vengeance in his eyes. The next day, Jeffrey takes his son out for a ride as if nothing has happened. They hike the forest, roam the city, and then prepare to return home at night. However, on the way, they are stopped by a mysterious van which is blocking the road. As usual, Jeffrey becomes aggressive and gets out of his car to take matters into his own hands. But when he approaches the van, a group of guys beat him up and load him inside. Little Troy notices this from his car and he screams at the men to let his dad go. He even runs behind their van for quite some distance, but in the end, he gets tired and eventually gives up. Surprisingly, the perpetrator behind the entire operation is revealed to be none other than Bronny. He has meticulously planned something evil to exact vengeance for what happened to his dad. In the next scene, an unconscious Jeffrey is brought to a shady-looking apartment, where several of Bronny's men tie him up and start working on him. At first, they inject him with various substances, then, they shave his entire body. They are actually planning to tattoo him top to bottom. The procedure takes several days. And by the end of it, Jeffrey has become completely unrecognizable. One night, he is dropped off at the same location where he was abducted. Due to the large amounts of narcotics present inside his body, Jeffrey is not able to walk or talk properly, so he drags himself all the way home. When he finally sees himself in the car's mirror, he is taken aback to learn that he has become completely black. The gangsters have tattooed every single inch in his body. As Jeffrey begins to panic, Krista suddenly wakes up from her sleep and assumes that an intruder is trying to barge into her house. So, she immediately springs into action and brings out a handgun. After she asks Troy to hide, she slowly heads towards the door to confront the intruder. To her shock, she sees a dark, completely undressed male coming towards her. Krista is about to shoot at him. But right then, she realizes that the man is actually her husband. She slowly lowers her weapon in disbelief, but the next second, a loud bang is heard and Jeffrey drops to the floor. It turns out little Troy has shot his own father from behind, mistaking him for an intruder. Third story. At the beginning of the third story, a young teenager named Isaiah is clutching a photograph and beating his meat when his dad, Sidney, suddenly walks in. The atmosphere is tense and awkward for a few seconds, but then, Sidney approaches his son and starts explaining that this is very normal. Everyone does it in their free time, because it is a fun thing to do. When Isaiah nervously asks his dad if he does it, Sidney says yes. This makes the teenager a bit more relaxed. And he thanks his dad for being an understanding person. However, when Sidney leaves the room, it is shockingly revealed that the picture Isaiah was holding on to belonged to none other than his dad. 14 years later, it is the biggest day of Isaiah's life. He is getting married. However, Sydney doesn't look happy at all. This is because he is constantly abused and harassed by his own son. Even during the family picture, Isaiah cannot stop running his fingers through his dad's body. Later, we see Sydney's wife, Joan, chatting and having a good time with all the guests. But when she doesn't see her husband and son around, she becomes worried and starts looking for them. As she reaches near the toilet, she hears some grunting sounds, which she clearly recognizes. Joan nervously peeks through the door, and what she witnesses sends chills down her spine. Her own son is doing it with her husband. Days pass, but Sydney is still tormented by his son. Even his wife doesn't do anything to stop the monster. With no one to call for help, Sydney pours out his entire story in a memoir, which he titles Cocoon Man. Unfortunately, he blames himself for not being tough on his son while he was growing up. A few months later, Sydney finishes his memoir, prints it, and then leaves it in his bedroom, hoping that his wife can read it whole and discover his tragic story. He is actually unaware that Joan already knows the truth. Unfortunately, before she can come out of the bathroom, Isaiah finds the memoir. He angrily confronts Sydney about it, and also warns him against making any copies in the future. Isaiah promises that he will unleash hell on his dad if the same case repeats again. Sadly, the terrified old man has no choice but to comply. One day, as Sydney is relaxing in the bathtub, wearing headphones, Isaiah suddenly starts knocking on the door. Sydney doesn't hear it, and this only makes the monster more aggressive. In a fit of rage, he breaks open the door and torments